Okay, well, everyone, thank you so much for coming out tonight to this workshop, whether you're in person or online. My name's Valerie Eklund. I'm the Climate Change and Energy Specialist with the town of Okotoks. If you're not aware, this is the third workshop in our Maximizing Home Energy Efficiency workshop series. This is sponsored by the ATCO Community Energy Fund. If you missed the first two events, I do recognize a few faces from the first one. You can watch the recordings on the Town of Okotoks YouTube page. The first one was about EnerGuide home energy evaluations, and the second one was about solar energy for your home. So those ones should be available on our YouTube page anytime you'd like to take a look. So today we will be myth-busting heat pumps. So we're really lucky to have Matthew Kramer here with us. He's from Horizon Heating, which is a leading HVAC company with extensive experience designing and installing heat pumps in our region. So please join me in welcoming Matthew.
Hello, everybody, and hello online. And do we need to confirm that online can hear us, or we're good? I think we're good. Okay. All right. Okay, good. So as Valerie mentioned, my name is Matthew Kramer. I'm with Horizon Heating, and we're going to myth bust heat pumps, or heat pumps in Alberta. Okay. So a little bit of housekeeping about what we're going to talk about. We're going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to do a heat pump primer. So some types and styles of heat pumps, some common practices and setup for our region, what's new and upcoming, and then we'll talk about grants, rebates, and other programs that are available, and then we'll have some questions. And we didn't talk about the format, Valerie, but do you typically ask questions at the end, or? So I'm fine with if people have questions during the presentation. If it's something that I'm going to answer already, maybe I'll just defer to that slide, but yeah, feel free to jump in and put your hand up. All right, so quick introduction. Who I am. So I'm second generation owner of Horizon Heating, and we've been in business since 1988. I purchased the business from my family after my father passed away in 2007. So we did actually open the business up during the week of the Winter Olympics. I've got an engineering background with specialization in HVAC, obviously, hopefully, manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and mechatronics, which not many people have heard of, but you can ask me later. Horizon Heating employs sheet metal workers, refrigeration and HVAC technicians, and gas tradespeople. We don't currently have a plumber on staff, but we've had plumbers on staff in the past. And can everybody hear me okay in here? Okay, good. And our typical jobs include new home construction, renovations, retrofit, and add-on replacement work, as well as service and maintenance and accessories, thermostats, and humidifiers and that kind of stuff, and heat pumps. All right, so heat pumps. What are they? So heat pump technology has been around for a long time, almost 200 years, in fact. And we use them every day. Everyone has a heat pump in their home already, a refrigerator. So refrigerators are heat pumps. And air conditioning units are heat pumps. They just cool, not heat. All right, heat pumps don't create heat, and they don't create cold. They move heat from one location to another. That's where the term pump comes from. So we're moving heat from one spot to another through the heat exchangers that are built into the system. So unlike a fuel burning appliance, a heat pump doesn't create heat. It transfers from one location to another, and uses the power of the refrigeration cycle to maximize this pumping of the heat. Any questions about that? Okay. So here's a couple of examples of what heat pumps can look like. They can look like a traditional air conditioning unit down in the corner here. And is there a beeper on here? I don't know. I'll just point. So on the left-hand picture, if everyone can see that, the gray unit on the left is actually an air conditioning unit. The one on the right, further down, is a heat pump. They look the same, except the heat pump is on a stand. So it's up out of the snow or out of the expected snow load. They don't actually get any snow in that corridor, but you can get snow. So we want to avoid snow building up into the components of the heat pump. In addition, heat pumps in certain modes can create ice and water. So it'll drip out of there. So we don't want that building up on the ground. And we installed both those units. And then the one on the right, doesn't look like an air conditioning unit, like a lot of people have seen. But there are AC units that look like that too. But that is a heat pump. Okay, a little bit of science. We'll start with the AC cycle first, if people can see this. So we were talking about how a heat pump moves heat from one location to another. So what we've got in the core of the heat pump or the AC unit is the compressor. So it's moving refrigerant to an outdoor coil, and it's transferring the heat from indoors to the exterior. And then it's moving it through an expansion device, which when a refrigerant expands, it cools down. So now we got cold fluid or cold gas running through the indoor coil, which is sitting on the furnace or sitting on a device that moves air. And that's absorbing the heat from the home, and then it goes back through the compressor and back out and gets released to the exterior. So then this little action here is where we'd be familiar if anyone's used a spray can or a dusting can. When you release the refrigerant out of it or release the pressure out of it, it cools down, right? So it's losing pressure. So we're gaining pressure and losing pressure. With a heat pump, there's a reversing valve that changes that whole cycle. So instead of the heat being rejected on the or heat being absorbed or on the interior, it's being absorbed on the exterior. Now, what's a little bit confusing about the terminology heat pump and why they can be used in cold climates is that it's cold outside. So where are they getting the heat from? There still is quite a bit of latent heat in outdoor conditions so that the system can still make or work on that to create more heat or move more heat and use the refrigeration cycle to pump that heat into the indoors. Sorry, that was a little convoluted, but any questions about heat pumps or these cycles? Yes. Yeah, exactly. So a heat pump has a reversing valve and other controls and a specialized compressor that's different than an air conditioning unit so that it can reverse the flow of refrigerant. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, it would be. Yeah. Yeah, you can't add I'm not saying you can't add a reversing valve to an AC unit, but it wouldn't be designed from the get-go to be used that way. So you'd start with a new unit. Yeah. Sometimes the interior portion would be exactly the same. So you may be able to keep some of the stuff, but the outdoor unit would change. Yeah. And the controls would change. Okay. All right, so just a couple of other examples of what they can look like. On the left-hand side, we've got a ducted system. So we've got a furnace and an indoor coil. Looks just like an air conditioning system, connected to ductwork. And then on this one, this is a ductless system. So a wall-mounted unit like we were talking about earlier, Lau. So this is connected to an outdoor unit, and that's connected to an outdoor unit. All right, so main types of heat pumps. So let me know if I'm going too fast or anything. So we've got air source heat pumps. That would be the most common style that we would see here in our region. And what it means by air source, it's using the outdoor air to make that, to do that heat exchange. Then we've got ground source heat pumps. So that's using a ground sink with tubes in the ground, either in a body of water or most often in the ground. So they're drilled in and the fluid is running through that system. And then in our region, we typically would see cold climate heat pumps, but there are standard heat pumps too. But cold climate heat pumps have variable speed inverter drive compressors. So those are that's the system that we would want to use really in our climate. Much more advanced than regular heat pumps and much more advanced than the basic AC system. So like I was saying, it's a little bit different than just an AC unit with a reversing valve. There's a lot more controls and electronics in there. And the beauty about the important part about the variable speed drive is that it's adaptable. So it can change its output to meet the demands that we're seeing. So a minus 30 day is much different than a plus 5 day. So the heat pump can change its output so that it's not just blasting away at the same temperature all the time. Yeah.
Okay.
You can, but that would be a variable refrigerant flow system. So one that would move heat from the upstairs to the downstairs without possibly even using the outdoor unit. So those exist, but that's different than a standard heat pump. Yeah. So those do exist, but it'd be that's a fancy system. Yeah. Yeah, no, you don't normally see those. And a lot of contractors probably don't even know what they are. But when they're in heating mode, they're in heating mode. When they're in cooling mode, they're in cooling mode, typically. But the VRF systems can do that. Repeat the question, sorry?
So if
Yeah.
forced air on the top floor,
Yeah.
would it be the same unit that would be able to heat both, or would I look at looking at two different units?
You can do that too, but that's an advanced system. So that would be, and I will go through that a little bit, but that would be an air to water heat pump,
Okay.
where the unit outside is actually heating water loops or glycol, and so it's kind of like geothermal, but not quite. Yeah, it's a little different. So then you would feed some storage tanks or feed the floor, and then you can also run it to a furnace or a fan coil or different things. And then it would reverse that to, you could actually cool the floor if you wanted to. I don't think people would normally design it that way. But then you could have the cooling system going, but then you also can do your domestic hot water as well. But those are advanced systems. Yeah, but they're not common, and they're adapting all the time. So the new stuff is coming out all the time. Yeah, and you had a question too?
Well, I did, but I'll just bring it up in a little.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so some common practices and setups that we see in Alberta. So air source heat pumps, we're mostly combining them with a gas furnace. So what we were calling a dual fuel system. So that's the most common installation in Alberta. So the heat pump is the primary heating source. It sounds a little backwards, but when we think about what our weather is actually like, we set them up so that the heat pump does the heating most of the time, and the gas furnaces are backup. And so the gas furnace would come on when it's too cold for either the heat pump to work or to make economic sense. And then considering this economic sense, we would look at factors like, do you have a really good electricity rate? Or do you have solar in your home? So we can change that switch over between gas furnace and heat pump heating through the thermostat. We can pick the temperature that we want to do that at. Yes? So typically about -10. Yeah. That's sort of where the cutoff is, where the heat pumps start to cost more than a gas furnace will to operate. Counterintuitively, maybe, until you think about it, an older furnace, so let's say we had an old furnace that was 80% efficient, 78 to 81 or something like that. That's most furnaces before the 2000s were like that. You can still put a heat pump on that. The heat pump is much more efficient than that older furnace. So it actually makes sense to run the heat pump at a lower temperature or down to a lower temperature when you have an older furnace than when you have a brand new 98% furnace. So that new furnace is much more efficient. It's almost on par with the heat pump. So with an old furnace, it would mostly make sense to run the heat pump even on colder days than you would think you would want to. So there's also all electric air source heat pumps. And so that's a heat pump paired up with an electric furnace. And they're not called electric furnaces, they're called fan coils, but think of it as a furnace with an electric backup in it. In that case, we would actually want to use the heat pump all the way down to its design temperature, all the way down to -30 or -20 or whatever that heat pump would run to, because it's going to be more efficient than the all electric system or the electric resistive backup that comes on all the time. So, but there's going to be times when the heat pump won't heat your home, whether it's frozen solid because it's cold outside, or there's a snowstorm, or it's just so cold that it needs to go into defrost mode, or all sorts of different factors. And what happens is the electric backup comes on in conjunction with the heat pump at the same time and bumps up the temperature, and the heat pump just keeps cruising along.
So if your furnace did come on, your heat pump doesn't cut back then?
So with a gas furnace, the heat pump and furnace don't run at the same time. It's one or the other. Yeah. But with an all electric system, you would want them to both run at the same time. I have seen some installs that aren't set up that way, but that's not the way it should be done. Does anybody know why we don't run the gas furnace and heat pump at the same time?
Get the furnace off?
So if we go back to that photo of the coil sitting above the furnace, the burner section of the furnace is below the heat pump coil. So if the furnace is on, it's boiling the refrigerant because it's firing at 200 degrees or whatever Fahrenheit is coming out of there. That refrigerant's going to come back to the compressor and destroy the compressor because it's not in the right phase. So in a fan coil situation, the all electric, the coil is actually below the heating strip. So we have heat coming through the heating strip, and if the heating strip only needs to come on a little bit, it can actually stage to come on just to pick up the right amount of heat that your system needs. All right, just a couple other examples of what heat pumps can look like. On the left, we've got that's a ducted unit, so it's attached to a furnace, but it's tall enough under that deck that we could put it under the deck. If that was a square unit, you can't put a square unit that blows out the top under a deck like that. It needs usually 4 feet above it. And then we've got larger units have 2 fans, so there's double the surface area on there. And you can see how slim these guys are. Double that. So this is 52 inches tall. So, it's about yay tall, where the other ones are 37, something like that, 36, 37. Yeah.
So like, would that affect the square footage that?
Oh, okay. That's square. Okay. So square footage of a home. So yeah, so this is nominally a 3-ton unit, and that's probably a 2-ton unit. Yeah.
What,
We're looking at, 2,000 to 2,400 square feet-ish. Depends on the age of the home too. Yeah. And then below 1,800 square feet or so, you'd be looking at a 2.5 probably.
Do both of those use the duct system?
Yeah, these are both attached to a furnace. Yeah. Yeah. And then, we can, so we've done lots of retrofit, and you can get a little creative as well. So we had a customer, and this is a common system that we do, someone who's got 2 furnaces in their home. The home was built with 2 furnaces. Did the home need 2 furnaces? No, but for comfort, they have top floor with one and main and basement with the other. So you get some zoning. So if you don't need to heat one floor, it won't heat the floor because, you got 2 furnaces. But it took up a lot of space outside, and it took up a lot of space in the mechanical room. So we actually removed 2 furnaces and put 1 furnace in. So this is the same house. So 1 furnace, cleared up a whole bunch of space, and 1 heat pump outside. And that's connected to a zone system. So they still have 2 zones, 2 thermostats, and it's all running through a zone control system. And because all this equipment is variable speed, if the top floor calls for cooling and just needs a little bit of cooling, then everything comes on with the right airflow and right cooling just for that zone. If it gets warmer out and the top floor needs more cooling, the system will ramp up to meet that demand. Then if the main floor comes on, or the main floor calls for cooling, then the system can choose to either, the dampers will open accordingly, and the system can choose to speed up or not, depending if it needs to, but most likely it would increase the airflow to meet that other zone. And then with heating, you could heat the main floor, not heat the top floor as well.
And they're pretty quiet, right?
Whisper quiet. Yeah. So this system, almost every single time we commission it, the homeowner asks us, when are we going to turn it on? You have to walk right up to it and put your hand over it to feel the air to know that it's on. That's how quiet they are. Yeah. Yeah, they're very quiet.
Leave them outside, that's it, but that's no, it's not a problem.
Yeah, so they're completely weatherproof. You don't want to cover them because you need to use them in the winter. And just like you don't actually need to ever cover an air conditioning unit either, but it helps keep them clean, I guess. But heat pumps and their AC units are completely weatherproof. You just need to make sure that they don't get dirty, and because they're a big radiator, they're sucking everything through it. So leaves and pollen and poplar fuzz and all that kind of stuff. So
Was there a filter to remove out of there or do you have to clean
you
the,
you wash them off, or you can take the louvers off and peel the carpet off if it gets that bad, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I don't know if you can see this or not, but this furnace here has a main trunk coming off of here. That's this guy right here now. So we just build the right fittings to fit and put the dampers in place, and yeah. Mostly in the mechanical room. If the this basement was finished, so we didn't have access to add another zone or whatever, I can see where you're going maybe. Yeah. So if your basement's open and you can change ducting to accommodate whatever you want, right? So typically with a 2 furnace system, they are zoned in some way. So we follow that zoning plan. Occasionally there's a heat run that's on the wrong zone. And if it's buried, what do? You just live with it, right? Or you choose to do a little demo and fix it. But if you want to change the zone, if you want to add zoning and you don't have zoning and your basement's developed, then you have to make the decision how to access that ductwork. Yeah. That makes sense? Yeah.
Two to one. Is the cost pretty much on par? Or are you?
It's pretty close because the system that we use or the equipment that we use for this advanced zone system is the highest end product. So we could have put 2 regular furnaces in, let's call them, and 2 standard heat pumps or different heat pumps. And, it would probably cost a little bit more than the zone system, but it's not like you just have one of everything. So it's the price is half. It's the equipment is that much more expensive. And plus there's more work in all the ducting, the controls, the thermostats are higher end, and then the control board for the zoning and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's about the same price as doing 2 again. But then you don't have the maintenance of 2. You don't have 2 filters, you don't have 2 humidifiers, and so on, right? And then in this home, I doubt we could have put 2 heat pumps in this home because of the electrical capacity. So that's another consideration as well. So this is a 40 amp unit. Yeah. There's lots of 30s and 40s, but there's some 50 amp units. That double tall fan one, there's a 50 amp unit. Yeah, so that's another consideration. Yeah. We would have had to put 2 of those in this home probably, and we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Need to have humidifiers with the heat pump then system?
Oh no, you can choose not to, but there is a humidifier with this. But I'm just saying, if you had 2 new furnaces, you wouldn't need, or versus 1, you wouldn't need 2 humidifiers. You just need 1. So it's just the maintenance cost of one of everything ongoing. Oh yeah, yeah. And this is a steam humidifier on this system. Yeah. And likewise, and this is a new home construction. The house is big enough, it needed 2 furnaces. So we've got 2 furnaces connected to 2 heat pumps. All right. Okay, I went through this a little bit already, talking about dual fuel and primary heating with cutoff. And so this slide's a little bit of a repeat, sorry. But what I wanted to highlight when we didn't talk about this is the last few winters have been excellent examples of being perfect for heat pumps. Other than there was a week in, I think it was February or 10 days in February this year, and then a week in January last year. Up until that cold snap, we didn't have any days below -10. I'm pretty sure. And that's sort of our magic number for heat pump cutoff. The last, oh, that's not even on this slide. There's another slide that has some temperatures on it. Yeah, but it's, when you think about our daily temperatures, it's perfect weather for heat pump, especially the 5-degree days when you still need heat. Why turn your gas furnace on for 3 minutes and burn away at, whatever the temperature of gas burns at, when you can just turn your heat pump on? So we've got high efficiency heating in those milder temperatures with the use of a heat pump. And the one thing that gets missed quite a bit in the discussions about variable speed technology and heat pumps in particular is that you will have a higher comfort level overall. And that's because that equipment can vary its output based on what we're actually seeing, what we actually need, versus most gas furnaces have one speed. So they're heating at 100%, whether it's 5 degrees outside or minus 35 degrees outside. And likewise with cooling, because it's variable speed, we can provide the right amount of cooling for that day as well. So if it's a 20 degree day, it's a much different cooling needs than a 35 degree day. And you can't do that with a normal air conditioning unit. The way a normal AC unit does it is it cycles on and off. So it's on at 100%, and then it's shutting off again. Does anybody have AC in this room? So, oh yeah, yeah. So you're familiar with, it probably does a pretty good job, but it's on and it's off. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's the way it's designed. And all right, the big question: do heat pumps work in Alberta? So, yes. So when selected, installed, and correctly set up, heat pumps are an excellent choice for cooling and heating in Alberta. So here's the average temperature. Sources are a little bit different, but I picked the worst case scenario actually. So our average temperature, that's the mean, in January in our region is -6. And the average daytime high is -1, and the average low is -11. I have seen some literature that says the average daytime high is +3, but it's pretty close. And we always think that we live in a cold climate, but we don't really live in a cold climate. We live in a climate that can get cold, but it's fairly mild. All right, the other big question: costs. So cold climate heat pumps are typically about 25% more than standard air conditioning units. Depends on the system though. Some factors that can affect that is you often will need an advanced thermostat if you don't already have one. So a thermostat that can control a heat pump, but also know what temperature it is outside so we can regulate that. So whether it's using the internet or whether it has a physical outdoor temperature sensor, those can both work. There's also electrical considerations. Sometimes adding a heat pump to your home, you may need to upgrade your panel. If you're already maxed out with dryers and hot tubs and other things, you may not actually have enough room for an AC unit or a heat pump. And heat pumps typically have slightly different or slightly higher electrical requirements than AC units, but there are some exceptions. Some of the most efficient heat pumps have lower requirements than AC units because they're more efficient. So they physically use less power, so they need a smaller service. Some specialized systems, like the one with the zoning that we were talking about, can be much more expensive than a regular AC unit, like 3 or 4 times the amount. But that goes with the whole system. That whole system is more expensive. Any questions? Are there any questions online? Do we know? No. Oh, there you're right there. Sorry, Cassidy. Okay, perfect. Okay. Yes. Both for sure. But what we're seeing in new homes is they're still putting in air conditioning units. So now we've got brand new homes that have an AC unit with a life expectancy of 15 to 20 years. And when is that retrofit going to happen? So we're way behind the ball on with new homes. So the old stock that's due for replacement, whether it's furnaces or adding an AC or adding a heat pump on a relatively new home without AC, but most homes that are being built, the standard that the builders are offering is air conditioning. Yeah, and it's a cost thing. Yeah. Yes, Cassidy. Okay. Who is it from? Okay.
Did throughout the house, is it from the fans in the gas furnace? As that can be quite noisy when running.
Yes. So just like think of it as an air conditioning system. If we added AC to a gas furnace, the heat pump uses the same fan as the gas furnace uses. And if we're adding a heat pump onto an existing furnace, unless it's a sophisticated matched combo, most heat pumps are going to run at or with the fan speed that the furnace is designed for in cooling mode. And the fan speed doesn't change, but the heat pump output changes. So the temperature of the air actually changes coming out of the floor vents or the vents. Whereas that other zone system I talked about, the airflow actually changes as well as the heat pump capacity changes. But most add-on type systems, I'm not going to call it a compromise, but they're not as sophisticated as if you're starting with a matching set. But yeah, the airflow is being pushed by the furnace fan. All right, some other things that are coming up. We've got changes to refrigerants. So it happens every 25 years or so. I don't know if anyone remembers R22 or R12. Yeah. So the transition from R22 to R410A, which is what the current refrigerant is, was about 25 years ago. And it was a prolonged transition. So it lasted quite a few years. This one was going to be a dead stop transition, but the government in the United States kind of changed that a little bit. So it's slow. There's still some products being made that use R410A, but the new two refrigerants are, of course, there's two, just like VHS and beta. So you can fight over which one's better. There's R454B and R32, and that's a manufacturer choice. We're probably going to see R32 more in the ductless world and with some ducted products, whereas the ducted, for the most part, are going to have R454B.
I don't know what any of that means.
Yeah.
So what's the net effect?
So the net effect is that this new refrigerant is in a new class of mildly flammable refrigerants. So they have to be handled differently. Installation practices are a little different. There's no real risk if everything is done correctly. There is a little bit of panic out there when people hear mildly flammable, but when you think about it, probably all of our homes have a gas line coming into our home, and you know, it's more flammable than there's refrigerants. So then there's some safeguards and safety checks and leak detection systems that are all built into these systems now, which aren't built into the old systems because we didn't need them. One good thing about the leak detection is that it will probably alert you that you've got a leak so that you can address it instead of finding out the hard way when summer comes along and your AC doesn't work. So it's going to be a better product overall. Of course, the new refrigerant is more expensive, and the equipment that goes with it is more expensive as well. Yes, Valerie?
Very old system to use this.
No. So eventually we'll run out of R410A new equipment, but they're going to make parts I'm not worried about obsolescence. So if today you bought a heat pump and it was R410, it's going to be serviceable and fixable for the entirety of its lifespan, which is unlike R22, which the old one. And the reason for that is so much air conditioning and heat pumps have been installed in the last 25 years compared to the previous 25 years that it's completely different landscape. There's going to be so much more support for this current product or the phased out product than the old 25-year-old product. So no, you're not going to have to upgrade, but it might be harder to find. If a major component went, you might have to wait for the part to arrive, but I'm not too worried about that. Yeah. Any other questions about that? Cassidy? Online question?
Yeah.
All right, who's it from?
Oh, Kristen.
Kristen, okay. Nope. So the leak detection is a refrigerant detector. So usually it's going to be installed in the indoor coil sitting above the furnace or in the fan coil where the refrigerant coil is. Sorry?
Would that be LEL detection then?
Could be. Yeah.
That's what they have for gas. and stuff, right?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Okay.
And the kicker is it's going to bring your fan on to dissipate the refrigerant that's leaking, but it's also going to stop your furnace from coming on because they don't want the flames to come on while that leak detector is being set off. So the downside is you could have a leak in your refrigerant system in the dead of winter and your furnace won't come on. So adding a little layer of complexity. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. I'd like to see everybody every year, but air conditioning units, cleanliness is the biggest thing. The most important thing or most important task of any AC system or HVAC system is to change your furnace filter. So change your filter regularly. That's going to keep the furnace clean. It's going to keep the indoor coil clean, and everything's going to run better. A dirty filter will cause the furnace to work harder, and it could cause a coil freeze up, but it's also going to cause the outdoor unit to work harder too because it's working at a different pressure than it's expecting because it's got reduced airflow. So a furnace filter is the biggest thing. On the exterior, you can clean that outdoor unit, whether it's the tall, slim ones or the square ones. You can wash them off, and it's just a light wash. You don't want to pressure wash them because we don't want to be bending those radiator fins.
You just remove the panel and then wash the fins off, or do you leave it?
You could try washing it with the panel on.
Because it's just loose water is what you want, pressure water. You just want.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you need to take things apart and comb it out, but yeah. And you could do that on your own, or you may need a professional to come in every now and then and tackle that. Yeah. I didn't put any wall of shame photos of dirty filters or dirty AC units on here,
I think we've seen them.
but I've literally it looks like someone's peeling a carpet
Yeah.
off the unit. Like there's someone's put a sweater on top of it. It's hilarious. Yeah.
Get better heat that way though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just wondering about the refrigerant, like.
Yeah.
Somebody professionally have to come in and check that?
No. We could. I wouldn't recommend tapping into the system. We would be checking temperatures. So you can check the operation of the refrigerant all from the temperature that it's running at. You know what I'm talking about. So, because every time you put a gauge on a system, you're actually removing a tiny bit of refrigerant. So over time, you're going to need a top up. Now, if you find that your system's not working and it's not cooling properly or it's freezing up or something, then we should put some gauges on and see what's going on. But typically, we're checking temperature.
You clean it with a leaf blower?
Maybe.
TikTok of a guy putting on the outside entry to the house, wife come flying out that front door.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What's in your house?
I've got, yeah. So I've got the zoned system, like what we saw. It's older. I bought the house with the furnace in it. It's a carrier, but it's a carrier, and I bought the house because it had the right furnace. And then what I did is the basement's open, so I put 4 zones in. I don't live in a big house, but I've got the front 2 bedrooms on one zone, the master bedroom on a zone, the main floor on a zone, and the basement on a zone. So I got 4 zones. So 2 up top, 1 on the main, and 1 in the basement. And then I've got an AC unit, but it's a 5-stage inverter drive unit. And I would have put the heat pump in, but this was 11 or 12 years ago, and the heat pump wasn't being shipped to Canada. So I got the AC version. Yeah.
So if you built again and bought a new house that needed a furnace, you would put the heat pump in.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a good point. Where are they manufactured at?
We'll get to that, but those most of them are there. Well, there's a mix. There's Japan, China, and the United States, and some in Mexico. Yeah. All right, loan programs. So there are loans available through a couple of different programs. There's the federal Greener Homes program and the municipal Clean Energy Improvement Program. So Greener Homes, is anyone familiar with the Greener Homes program? Yeah. You have to be careful that you pick the right equipment. So you can't just put any heat pump on any furnace and hope you qualify for the loan. It's got to be either a match system or a specific heat pump that's made to go on any furnace. So yeah, typically entire system requires to be replaced, but there are some examples where you can put a heat pump on an existing furnace. Newer furnaces work better with heat pumps because they've got more capable blower motors, but you could put, like I was discussing before, a heat pump on a modern but older furnace. Something that's 40 years old, no, but 25 years, yeah. Yeah. Right. So the Greener Homes program could change. We don't know exactly what the government's doing, but they did announce recently a $600 million addition to it. I had a customer call today and a customer call last week that their Greener Homes grant was reopened, if anyone's familiar with the grant. There used to be a grant program as well. Somehow they got their grant reopened. And there is a rumor about a heat pump only program coming from the federal government. But I've been hearing this rumor for 2 years. So I don't know yet. I don't know. So then the Alberta Municipalities Clean Energy Improvement Program is available in several communities, including Okotoks, Calgary, Airdrie, Cochrane, I think Canmore as well, and then other municipalities through Alberta. And that's, and Valerie, are you involved with that? Yeah. So it's run by the towns, but through the province. And they offer flexible, low-cost financing for a wide range of home renovations that are geared towards energy improvements. Same thing with the Greener Homes loan program. It's not just heat pumps. You can do windows, solar, insulation, water heater, heat pumps, not tankless water heaters, but you can do a tankless water heater under the Clean Energy Improvement Program. You can replace an air conditioning unit in the Clean Energy Improvement Program, as long as that air conditioning unit is more efficient than your old air conditioning unit. But I would recommend a heat pump. Yeah. All right, some resources. The government of Canada has a really good website about energy efficiency. So EnerCan. If you just typed in EnerCan and heat pumps, there's pages and pages of great information. There's videos. Those diagrams that I took with the refrigeration cycle, I took those off of EnerCan. They've got lots of information about energy efficiency. There's a great program that's based in Alberta called Green Energy Futures. Has anyone heard of that? Yeah. Their latest podcast, the very latest one was about Fletchford, the community in Edmonton, and they've got a central district heating system with heat pumps in all the homes. So there's lots of stuff about heat pumps on there. And there's also YouTube. They're on YouTube, or it's a blog or podcast as well. And then there's the Canadian Climate Institute. And Valerie, that's the website that you asked me about. There's a heat pump calculator on there. So you can run through some life cycle costs or some costing by entering the age of your home, what kind of heat pump you're looking at, how old is your furnace, all that kind of stuff. And there's different communities throughout Canada. Edmonton's not on there, but Calgary's not. But Edmonton would be very similar to Calgary.
Now we know we can just call you and ask the same questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any questions? Okay.
To go back and forth between online. So I have one. Okay, so it's from Aaron.
Aaron?
Aaron's primary concern is cooling in the summer. Is there a reason to go with a heat pump over AC?
Yes, absolutely. So because a cold climate heat pump is variable speed, and which is a variable output, it's going to give us the right amount of cooling for that application. So like I was saying before, a 20-degree muggy day is very different than a 35-degree dry day, or vice versa. So if we can just provide the right amount of cooling for an extended period of time, you end up with more cooling everywhere in your home at a lower rate, more comfortable, quieter, using less energy, all those boxes ticked, and you're going to be more comfortable overall. Versus a basic air conditioning unit, which we have to size for the worst case scenario, kind of, so the design temperature. So it's got to be sized to be able to cool your home on one of the hottest days of the year. But on a mild day when you still need cooling, it's coming on, blasting away, and it could cool off one corner of the house really close to the furnace really fast and then shut off. And then meanwhile, upstairs in the bonus room that's south facing, it's 34 degrees in there. So if we can get cooling going everywhere more gradually, you'll end up with a much more elegant system. Right. All right, what else?
Okay, Bill.
Okay.
Can heat pumps be used in conjunction with in-floor heating?
You can, yep, so interesting. I thought I had a slide about that. Oh, air to water heat pumps. Okay, sorry guys. So maybe Bill's question is, can he heat his floor with a heat pump? It would have to be something like an air to water heat pump. And that is a unit that sits outside that's connected to a storage tank, or maybe even connected to a boiler system that feeds that system first. And you can, just like we want to use an air source heat pump as our primary heating, You can use that air to water heat pump for most of the work, but you probably would need a backup system as well. So whether that's a gas boiler, or, some other method of heating that water. Yeah.
One of the things when you talk about electricity prices, especially in Alberta and our electricity market is a very interesting market. But is there any way to kind of almost arbitrage against high electricity prices by doing some kind of storage? Because you kind of mentioned storage. Has that ever been explored with the heat pumps?
Maybe if we had variable electricity rates, you could run the heat pump. Yeah. You can. So I don't know if there's any municipalities in Alberta that have a variable rate metering system. Other parts of the world do, where their water heaters, electric water heaters are set up to come on at 2 a.m. when nobody else is using power, because their power generation is still going. They got to put the power somewhere. So you could, if your electricity rate was cheaper in the night, you could run your AC and cool your house way down, and then turn it off. Would it be comfortable? I don't know. So with the air to water system, you could cool a storage tank. Yeah. 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 Or you could have electric backup batteries to charge when your electricity is lower, then use your batteries to run the heat pump when you need it during the day. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to try and translate this into what I think this person is asking. They're concerned about the variation in prices for like a gas furnace and a 1,500, 2,000 square foot home with AC. And they're wondering if you can give them like an average market price for that sort of thing, like what they should be looking for. Because it varies a lot, and maybe an explanation of why it might vary so much.
So like a furnace and AC, like if someone wanted to buy a new furnace, retrofit an AC, I would say probably $15,000 ish, maybe a little bit less if it was AC, and then a couple $1,000s more if it's a heat pump. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find that they'll pay back the $2,000 extra fairly quickly, or because of the price of the gas electricity, it's not going to be that big?
No, at our rates, so weirdly, or not, maybe not weirdly, but the heat pump is so efficient at the temperatures that we run it at, so -10 and above, that it's at the same efficiency as a new furnace. So the cost is going to be, the operating cost is going to be about a wash, but you're gaining the comfort level of the heat pump versus just having a gas furnace alone. And you're gaining the comfort level of having AC and advanced AC as well. Yeah. So right now, with the way gas electricity are, it's a wash. You're not going to save money unless you have solar. So if you've got solar, then you may have free power, for most of the year or part of the year or whatever. Yeah. But then again, you can get a loan or a grant, or maybe a grant, and a couple different loan programs for heat pumps, whereas it's limited with furnaces and air conditioning only. I wanted to add something that I found today. Just with the Greener Homes loan, or the Greener Homes program in total since 2020, pardon me, there's been 240,000 heat pumps installed in Canada since 2020. Can anyone guess how many of those were in Alberta? Pardon me. What's that?
Two, that's what.
Two? A few more than two. I've got like 10 pictures in there. 10%? No. No, lower. Lower. So apparently 2,192 heat pumps under this program. We've installed over the last 4 years, I'd say about 500 heat pumps, give or take. So, and not all of them are part of a loan program. So that number is actually quite shocking.
Game got really cold, the heat's not gonna help.
Yeah.
But now you're.
100,000 in Ontario. But Ontario also has a provincial program. I think it was $8,000 or something. Yeah, BC's got a provincial program. The Yukon has a provincial program, and we don't. Apparently in the Yukon, since 2020, 46 heat pumps have been installed under this program.
Where?
The Yukon territories, 46 heat pumps.
It's cold up there.
It gets a little cold, yeah. Yeah. So 2,000 heat pumps is not a lot.
Oh.
No. Any other questions? Yeah. Yep.
We were wondering about the difference in cost for heat pumps here versus the United States, and they were seeing that they're super cheap in the US, and I don't know if that's real data or not, so.
I don't know. Like, it would probably depend where in the US, because like I follow some service forums and stuff. Pricing's all over the map down there. You can have $50 an hour service call or $500 an hour service call. It just depends where you are, which state and stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Color isn't worth much.
yeah.
So what does your company provide then if somebody wants to a heat pump?
Yeah, we can, we'd have a consultation and come out and take a look and see what the best fit. Yeah, not an engineering plan, but we do an analysis of your home and yeah. And, look at what your furnace can do.
Interesting.
Yeah. Or a new one or, yeah. Heat pump selection, heat pumps only come in, 4 or 5 sizes. So, most homes fall within a couple of sizes. We don't want to oversize a heat pump unless the system can handle it. And if you want to run the heat pump for more heating, oversizing it will help with the heating because that has more capacity. Will be able to heat your home more effectively, but it may not cool your home as effectively. So we have to be wary of why we're selecting it. Yeah. Right. Yes.
Maybe off topic, but hot water tanks and hot water on demand.
Yeah.
And
A heat pump water heater, you mean?
so just on demand heat, hot water.
So, I didn't talk about heat pump water heaters. They're coming, or they're here, but they're becoming more popular as well. They're all electric versus an on-demand, which is a gas unit. So on-demand is more efficient than a standard hot water tank. And on-demand is more efficient than a power vent hot water tank. But it's less efficient, sort of, than heat pump water heater. And the cost should be about the same to run. On demand has its benefits, for sure. What's that? The heat pump water heater?
Yeah.
I think they're pretty quiet. We've had one person say they're not, but we didn't install that unit. But to me, it was quiet. But it was right under his master bedroom, and they had a newborn baby. So typically, yeah. Yeah, so heat pump water heater looks just like a regular old hot water heater, kind of, but it's got a heat pump pack built onto it, and it's using the air in the room to grab the heat and put it into the water, and using the power of refrigeration. Yeah. The heat pump's on the tank itself. Yeah. Yeah.
What temperature does it need to water at, or does it need supplemental heat to raise the temperature to 150?
Typically, you would run it at 120 or so. It does have electric backup heaters in it. So if you had a lot of demand, and the heat pump takes longer to warm up than a gas tank or a all electric tank. So you could choose to wait for the hot water and let the heat pump do the work, or it could cycle the electric heaters on. Yeah. They got different programmable modes where you can have efficiency or comfort, or, you know, a combination of the two. Yeah. All electric. Yeah. Yeah. And they're available now. Yeah. And they qualify for the Greener Homes loan and the CEIP. They're comparable in price to a tankless water heater. Yeah. Yeah. But then again, if you've got a heat pump, or if you want to put a heat pump in, and you've got a hot tub and all the regular stuff, you may not have the capacity to add the heat pump water heater, because they're typically 30 amp units. So one device may have to stay gas, but it depends on your electrical service. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? No, we're good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Perfect.
We're going to do a draw. Can I do a draw?
We will in a minute, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, should have
No.
put your name in there.
No.
Yeah, so thanks everyone so much for coming. I'm sure maybe you'll hang around for a little bit if
Oh, yeah,
people
for
have
sure. I'm here.
specific
Any
questions.
Yeah, let me know.
Amazing. And I'll just let you know as well, we have Green Living Workshop coming up April 30th about trees. So choosing and planting the right trees for where you want to put them in your yard. So that one's coming up on the 30th. And then if you haven't been to this Eco Education Center before, Environmental Education Center before, we do have kids programming here every Friday, of course, except for this Friday because it's Good Friday, but every other Friday we will have that here in case you have some kids that you want to bring out. So we'll leave it there, and then we'll go ahead with the prize draws. So I will get you to pick one name first to start. They get to pick.
Oh, they get to pick.
Yeah.